kids / making your spouse a priority?
I'll start. On the kids front, one thing that we really love that we do now that I think who we got the idea from, may have even been Rich, as I'll talk about it here, is doing family meeting time. Do you guys do family meetings?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I did get it from Rich then. And just as our kids got older, we started noticing there were just moments where they would disagree or want to do things differently than we normally had planned or had set the routine to be. And so just setting a time that, and we usually do it during dinner time, our family meetings. And so if Mackenzie is the one that tends to disagree more and wants to do something differently, we say, oh, that's fine, but we're not going to do it now. We need to talk about it at a family meeting. And so she's gotten good at calling, I'm on a family meeting. And so we now do those, and those have been a helpful space for us. But wish I'd started those sooner probably, or at least building that in a little sooner in our life. So on the kid front, that's one. So that'll be the kickoff.
Just on the marriage front, so I wish that earlier I'd gotten better at getting my thoughts out of my head and sharing them with my wife. Because guys, we can tend to kind of keep them inside instead of like get them out there. So that's what I would say. Anything else? Okay. Next question.
All right. What is something you wish you talked about with your wife before you got married?
We should probably repeat the question.
The question is, what is something you wish you talked about with your wife before you got married? Is that right? Yeah, no problem.
You know, that guy, we should have 2 microphones.
I know. Gosh, get the sound guys out here.
Sound guy.
Anyone else want to start?
I mean,
Go for it. You guys have
yeah, I sort of felt like when I read this question, I was sort of like, I don't really know. I feel like we kind of covered most of the bases, like, you know, religion and, you know, how many kids do we want? When do we want to have kids? What is our sort of view of how that will look like? I guess the only thing I could say is, as Marie mentioned, I do homeschool. Well, right now my youngest is still in preschool at King of Glory Preschool. And so when I told Erica, my wife, that I wanted to homeschool them, she was like very freaked out and like was thinking that I was asking her to do it. And I was like, no, you don't have to do anything with it. Like, I just want to do it. I think I'll enjoy it and it'll give me time with the kids. So maybe discussing that earlier, but it ended up being great. She loves that I do that. And then she started to help, of course. So she's realized that it's also kind of fun. So I guess that would be the only thing for me, which is a very specific thing. But yeah, most of the big things we kind of covered before we got married, which was part of the reason that I knew she was the right one for me.
Yeah, I guess just pastorally, I think through the reality that you go through things you never know you will when you get married. So to me, it's not so much about what things you've talked about, if how you've established communication strategies and styles. And that's been, apparently I'm wrong, so Siri
does not agree.
Siri does not agree. So just really establishing how to communicate through things and learning how the other communicates and needs to hear stuff. You know, Susie and I, you know, she knows that sometimes she needs to say to me, hey, I have something I really want to talk to you about later. Let me know when you're ready. Because sometimes I can't take things spontaneously. So we have developed like language of communication in our marriage and really worked at establishing that even before we were married. Just how we both hear and need to be heard and communicate and those sorts of things. So yeah, to me, like I didn't know I'd go through half the things that we've gone through. We didn't know we'd go through infertility. We didn't know that Susie would have a BRCA2 cancer gene and have, you know, I always say voluntary, but there's a better medical word than that, you know, double mastectomy, prophylactic double mastectomy and things like that. So there's like realities where we didn't know we'd go through any of this, but we had established that. How do we communicate? How do we need to hear each other? What are each other's sort of like code words for, hey, I need to talk about this and let me know when you're ready kind of things.
Okay. Are you going to repeat all the questions?
Sure, I'll repeat them, right?
Okay.
Can't.
When and how did you decide to do chores for your kids? How does the division of labor look inside your house?
The question is, when and how did you decide to do chores with your kids? What does the division of labor look like in your house? I'll start this at the mic. We have not done much with this yet, so we're not at the forefront of this one. We in terms of like chore charts or lists or specific duties, we're still kind of in the category of all, when you make your mess, you clean it up. We all work together to get the dishes up off the table after dinner. So right now we're kind of in still group mode a little bit, and the girls just kind of help us. But we are close, and it's particularly our older one. We probably should start doing that soon. So I do not have any strategies yet for that, because we're not really in the chore category, at least we haven't yet. And it's more of a group mode and getting them to help on.
Mackenzie's not mowing the lawn yet.
Mackenzie's not mowing the lawn yet, sadly. But it is an important piece of it. We definitely value their participation in it. And Finley, our youngest, likes to clean so far, which has been interesting. Yesterday, literally while I was power washing, she cleaned the loft and the downstairs, which was amazing. My wife likes things clean as well as I. Her threshold for cleanliness is, I don't know what the sooner, or it gets dirty is dirty to her sooner than it is for me. And so my girls see that and realize that she gets frustrated when it's not. So I think in their good moments, they realize that mommy likes it clean, and so they'll do that. But we're still kind of in that group mode, so I'm listening to the answers to this question as well from the others.
Well, chores to me are just a really big issue. It's your way of teaching your child to be competent, to have confidence, and it kind of fights entitlement mentality and kind of a me first mentality. So I think the younger you can start, and whether it's a group effort, but I grew up with, there are 4 of us kids, and we had just a really kind of good view of chores and helping. And we tried to promote that with our kids. It didn't always work. There was some grumbling and complaining, but being clear on what they can do. A young child can put napkins on the table and can help with things, and then you can kind of formalize it more into, hey, you can, you're in charge of this or doing this. Just helping them grow as they get older. But and along with it, I really believe in kids working in middle school and high school and learning responsibility in that way too. 35% of college grads have never worked any job, okay? That's not good life skill preparation. So whether it's babysitting or being a lifeguard in Williamsburg, which I think is a great summer job, anything, what can you do to help them become responsible adults? And it all starts with chores. There's also a correlation between chores and homework. They're exactly the same thing. You're expected to do something at a particular time and do it well. That's the same skill, chores, homework. So they correlate. Thanks.
Yeah, for us it's been interesting. It sounds like I have the youngest kids of anyone on the panel. So for us, we do have a chore chart. We have little stars that we put up. Now the problem is Erica and I don't always follow through with putting the stars on. That's the trouble with these things. We need our own star chart for remembering to fill out theirs. And the problem is sometimes we have Nick is 6 and Christian is 4, and so for Christian it's a little hard to think about how do I do this on my own, and he's always used to his brother being around anyway, or being around people. So for him, he kind of freaks out if you tell him to do something by himself. So we've sort of. We get frustrated if we go tell them to clean their room and 8 hours later it's still it's messier than it was, when we told them. But we sort of have realized how to navigate that. Nick, our oldest, we can pretty much give him a few simple tasks and he can do them on his own and he'll do them well. And so we think it's really important that they learn how to, a lot of their chores really are kind of the group things you were talking about, picking up their plates from the table when they're done, cleaning up their room, helping clean up, in our living room, things like that. But they do have a few things like feeding the cats, We haven't quite gotten them into the scooping the litter box yet, but hopefully that's a near thing. You know, and then cutting the grass. You know, I'm sure it's only a year or two away. So, but yeah, I think it's really important. Just to echo exactly what Mark said. I mean, I didn't work when I was in high school or middle school, and then Erica did. My wife did. And I feel like that was so valuable for her. She worked all the way through high school, through college. She worked at Chick-fil-A. You know, it wasn't like some, you know, crazy job, but she, you know, although that is a great place to work, especially for kids. So, you know, I do strongly believe that. I kind of wish that my parents had like pushed me more. I mean, I think I turned out okay, but you know, I kind of wish that they had pushed me more, you know, and kind of imposed that a little bit more discipline when I was younger.
It wasn't quite in the question, but I'll just say the division of chores between Susie and I has also had to develop over the years. Like Susie she was working part-time for a while, and so she took on more of like sort of the household chores that the boys couldn't do. And then when she was working full-time or is working full-time, we have our family business meeting, but we also, Susie and I have our own weekly business meeting where we go through things. And one of those was, how are we dividing up chores? I hate grocery shopping, she handles that. I love laundry and cleaning the kitchen, so those things are fun for me. I like to vacuum. Because I have a higher dirt, like, things are dirtier quickly to me than they are to Susie. Like, you and Lex and Susie and I swap roles there.
That's why I like Susie better.
Well, she's a 7 on the Enneagram too, so she's way more fun than I am. So, but anyway, that has always been a discussion. And in the phases of parenting and marriage, you find that you'll have to have honest conversations about how do we distribute our chore chart. And when you're doing something, if you're going, man, why am I always picking up everybody's dishes or things like that, it's really your problem. You've got to figure out how to have that meeting and the business meeting and be able to say to your teenage son, I don't care what you're doing, stop what you're doing, get those dishes out of the TV room, that's driving me insane. Which has an Enneagram 2, because I'm like a 2 with a 1 wing. I just want to do it myself, but that's not helpful either.
Okay. What is the most common disagreement on parenting with your wife? What strategies have you used to overcome it?
The question is, what is the most common disagreement between you and your wife and in parenting, and what are some of the strategies used to overcome that, or those?
This one is interesting because Erica and I grew up in very different homes. I mean, I mentioned the thing about her working and me not. But in general, her family was much more like dysfunctional, you know, yelling, slamming doors, things like that growing up. And so her parents have sort of a different view on how, you know, how things should be done. And of course, she was parented differently. Whereas for me, you know, my parents like very rarely like yelled at me unless I like really deserved it. And they had sort of, and they didn't argue in front of me, things like that. So, you know, Erica, I think, kind of knew that she didn't want to follow in her parents' footsteps, you know, early. So, you know, the biggest things are for us, we don't really have that many disagreements. We were talking about this last night because I was reading her the questions. And we both kind of said, you know, neither of us have like the answers. We don't have like a, you know, rule book or whatever that tells us what to do. So a lot of parenting is just, you have to kind of trial and error, you know, you have to do it by trial and error. But one thing we have committed to doing, and I think this kind of goes to what you were saying about knowing how to talk, how to communicate about communicating. We always, you know, if we do have a disagreement about, you know, hey, I think you kind of yelled at the kids too much there, we always take it offline, not in front of the kids, it's always after the fact. We don't ever want to show them any sort of, you know, fighting or anything like that between us. You know, we want them to sort of understand that mommy and daddy are the, you know, we are the authorities, we do love them, we want what's best for them. And then, you know, if I have an issue or if she has an issue with how something went down, we'll talk about it later. You know, not necessarily at a business meeting, but same idea.
Let's get more coffee. Yeah. One of the challenges, I think, for a dad is, you know, if you're coming home from work or something like that and your wife is wanting to talk about a parenting issue, it just takes a while to get up to speed with it. You know, I think we want to help as husbands and dads, but we may need to hear you out, we may need to observe things. We've just kind of been in a different universe for a while, and so bringing us up to speed, we want to help out, but you need to do something right now kind of thing just doesn't work too well. Just that I guess careful communication and really working to co-parent is really the goal, and that's a challenge. There's no way around it. As guys, a lot of times our focus is on our career, and we have to really make that transition to home, and it can take a while to do that. So, anybody else want to? Guess we're ready for another question.
Okay.
Good.
How do you balance supporting your husband's hobby while also encouraging family time and cost? So if you have like something you want to do.
What's a hobby?
Children.
Well, say you want to get into something. Maybe none of you have hobbies.
No, we do. I'm just kidding.
As the question is, how do you balance supporting your husband's hobby as well as the other responsibilities like kids and the cost of it, pros and cons of that, and how do you kind of balance that well in life?
I'll say again, like Susie and I, our weekly business meeting, we talk about things like, what do you want to do? What do I want to do? So if she wants to go away for a weekend with the girls, it's like, awesome. Just let's get it on the calendar. So we have a plan for that. And if a lot of times I just take my boys with me on things like fishing and hiking and biking. And Susie comes too. We all do it together. She doesn't really fish. I'll take that back. I do. But yeah, it's just communicating and putting it on the calendar for us, and then having a plan around it is what becomes so important. And again, I think in marriage, if you're frustrated, either one, if a spouse is frustrated because the other one is out all the time, or you feel like they're out all the time, like that's when you go, okay, let's talk about these things. I think like just leaning into conflict and those feelings is so important in marriage, and not letting it build up over time. I worked in New York City for a while. There was a commune in Brooklyn that had everything from like, low-income minimum wage workers to high-end Wall Street folks. And I loved listening to them talk about commune life. And they would say, there's never anything wrong with conflict. The value of a community is how you work through the conflict. And so to me, like having those feelings like, Susie, that's like the 5th girls weekend in 6 weekends. Like, she wouldn't really do that. Although she is the number 7, so she might, Luke. She might go off and do all those things. Just being able to say, hey, can we talk about this, is such an important step. And so, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think to add a phrase to it a little bit, something that Alexis and I talk about, sure, a book somewhere about this, but she uses the phrase mental load a lot, and how to, like when, no one thing is like too hard for her or for me to do, like this chore or this responsibility or this task, but it's, we on either side, that's one way we try to talk about it is we say, we feel like our mental load has gotten beyond what I can bear, and can we discuss kind of which cards, so to speak, you have and which cards I, so to speak, have in life, and maybe rearranging some of those. So that's kind of a phrase we sometimes use. And similar to Rich, we do, we have Friday lunch kind of husband-wife meetings, and that's where we discuss these things.
Over food? That's so much more fun than
Over food.
I like that.
I like going out to eat. It's a 7 in me, so I do enjoy that. And so that's where we discuss those things. And the calendar is, I'm not as good on the calendar. So the one way I really try and care for Lex in wanting to do my hobbies is, as long as it gets on the calendar and we've talked about it, even like a day or two in advance, if it's something small, like she is all on board, she supports it, she's great about it. The frustration for her, and I've learned, is when it's just out of blue, or I didn't tell her, or I didn't use the system we've set up to communicate that. And likewise, when she has, it's interesting when she has a girls' weekend or something coming up, It's funny, she'll put it on the calendar because she's really good about that, and I'm not as good at checking the calendar, and so she's learned to put on the calendar, and hey, I put something on the calendar, or hey, I have this coming up, so I'm more of the verbal, I just need to be told, kind of tell me out loud, and I'm totally fine with it. So that's kind of one of those interesting different communication ways we have learned about each other and try to care for one another within that. And then as really just the balance is key for the hobby side of things, I think for us, it's especially with kids. And I'm a big believer that the goal of marriage is oneness, and hobbies is one of those that when someone is getting frustrated over it, like you've been out a long time or you keep going there, usually there's something wrong there when that oneness is broken, and one of you's, maybe I'm avoiding her by just going out all the time, or feel like she's not holding up her end of the bargain, so I'm gonna get what I can get now, those kinds of things, which are just unhealthy thoughts and things. And so good balance is key, and for us, when we're in healthy moments, we really do enjoy the family time. And so hobbies just become an extracurricular, every so often thing that's a great release valve. I don't feel like I need that to get away from home because I'm enjoying things and feeling great at home. So that's a couple thoughts from me. Next one.
What is the best way your wife can tell you she had a rough day? You were saying about the transition, when you come home, you don't necessarily want to be offloaded on right then, but then sometimes, especially with little kids, we haven't talked to anyone else all day. So what do you think is a good way to navigate that?
Yeah, so the question is, what is the best way or how to navigate telling your husband, us, that you've had a rough day?
I mean, why do we have to even tell you?
Why do you even have to tell us? How do you not know?
I'm sorry.
Just assume?
I'm fine.
Maybe that's the answer. We should just assume you had a rough day.
Why can't you assess it as soon as you walk in the door?
If you could put a sign on the parking, as we drive in, maybe, you could put an LED screen on the garage that tells smiley face or sad face. That'd be good. Yeah, exactly. Well, I can kick it off. So both my wife and I work full time, and so we are a little different in the sense that neither of us is staying home with the kids full time. And so I guess our coming home experience is more similar to each other because we both work and kind of know that. And so for us, the hard thing is more, I guess, just we're both jumping right back into kids as soon as we get home. And it's not like, oh, I've had the kids for all day, it's your turn, I'm taking a break, you're doing this. And so for us, it's been figuring out which evenings, who does what, and we kind of divvy up who's doing meals on different days. And then for us, the key weekly routine has been Mondays is both of our day off. It's kind of our Sabbath day, to use a church word, since Sunday is a work day for me in particular. She actually doesn't work on Sundays, but and so Mondays is our day where one kid is home, one's in school, and so I take Finley in the morning, Lex gets alone time, and Lex takes Finley in the afternoon, I get my kind of alone time to do things. And that's a really important rhythm for us in terms of health throughout the week, so that rough days as they come, we know we always have that space set aside. So that's a little bit for me.
Yeah, so I work remotely, and so that means I am home all day, but I am sort of not home at the same time. And so throughout our marriage, Erica has gone from working full-time to working part-time to sort of as needed or whatever. She's sort of in the latter category right now, which both of us want. But the biggest thing I would say for this particular question is, if you've been dealing with, little irrational people all day, which is how it feels. Sometimes I feel like I deal with big irrational people at work, and then come home and deal with little irrational people. But when you're dealing with those all day, I would tend to prefer, and this is me. Maybe there's sort of different opinions, but my preference would be what is sort of the mission? What's the goal right now? What do we need to get done right now? What do you need from me? I don't necessarily need to hear a 5-paragraph, dissertation about all the things that they did that day. If it's literally like they need to get bathed and we need to feed them dinner and we need to get them to bed because, you know, they've both been running around and they're crazy and they also destroyed like our living room, you know, if that's what it is, then that's fine. And then we can kind of put the, like, okay, what actually happened today? Because I know she also wants to get that off of her chest. She's just frustrated and wants to tell, like Marie said, another human being that's not, not irrational. You know, we can put that off till like after bedtime. That's kind of how I would prefer to do it. Is like, what do we need to do now? You know, rather than kind of getting the full like vomit of, you know, here's everything that went wrong today. Right when I get done with work. That would be my sort of take on this.
Yeah, I would just say that couples that check in, that kind of have a balanced sharing together, you know, how was your day, how was your day? You know, that sets kind of a foundation then to figure out what's next, what's the business, what has to happen, you know, to survive. And then hopefully there'll be a time, you know, and often it maybe after kids are in bed where you can really talk, where in the pressure of the moment it may be hard to do that. So, you know, couples that also communicate throughout the day with texting and saying, hey, you know, this has gone well, and here's a cute picture, and then here's something that's tough, here's something that's difficult, so that you're not just coming back together cold. That really, I think that helps too. So but yeah, I don't think any of us husbands can be mind readers, and if we did try, we would get it wrong. So I don't think you want us to do that, but just to communicate well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I can't normally tell the way Susie's parked her car whether it's been a good day or not. I would say we've developed code like language. So then I just go like, oh, listen, fix, or go for a walk. Like that's our thing, and we do that for both of us. So sometimes I walk in, and she looks at me, and she's like, listen, fix, or go for a walk. And I'm like, we gotta go for a walk. Now my kids are older, so I'm not worried about, are they gonna stick something in an electrical socket? You know, we can just leave our boys and prioritize grabbing the dog and going for a 1 hour walk and like hashing it out. But I do think it's important to have sort of that language. None of us are mind readers either way. And so, yeah, just going like, oh, do you, like, and maybe at that stage, Susie did stop teaching while the kids were real little so that she wanted to be home for some of that. But I could walk in the door and go, listen, fix, or you go for a walk. You know, like she needs a workout. So then it was like, oh, well, go put on your running shoes and I'll see you whenever you're done. And the kids will be asleep when you get home and you can unwind. So like, I feel like there is, developing language around that is always so important to me. Because neither spouse mind reads very well. Sometimes we get it right.
What's something you wish or something your spouse has done that makes you feel like a priority to her?
Do you want to repeat the question? You're so good at that.
Keep the voice the same, that's right. What's something your wife does or has done that has really shown you that she prioritizes you, that you're a priority in her life?
You feel valued.
You feel valued. She's calling me right now, I could ask her.
Or what do you wish you did?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
You know, the 5 love languages, you probably heard of those. I mean, those help, but, you know, for a wife to know her husband's primary love languages and to apply those is helpful, and obviously for a husband back. And even as parents, for us to begin to understand our kids, to know how they really most feel loved, right? Many of our kids, it may be quality time, that they really want time with us. Some are more focused on affirmation or physical touch. But anyway, so those are concepts I believe God really allowed the Christian community to understand, that people have different love languages, and that if we're hitting on those, and by the way, for men, physical touch and affirmation are the top 2, right? So a wife that understands that in her husband will go a long ways to him feeling loved and prioritized.
Yeah, since we talked about it earlier, for Lex and I, the Enneagram has been a helpful tool. So she's a 1, I'm a 7. And so as a 7, one of the things, kind of the catchphrases that describe us or our personality is that variety is the spice of life. That's kind of one that describes my personality. So things that she does that I know she knows me and values me is trying new things, being adventurous, and open to, even if it's just a new restaurant, like I just like to try new things. It's just fun for me. And so when she has those, when she has an idea like that, and it's clear that she's doing it not because she loves this one meal at the same place all the time, because that's her. Like, we're going to the place she wants, that she loves, it's this one meal, but she's chosen something that I clearly know she may or may not like something there because she hasn't looked at the menu yet and hasn't picked out her thing. That she really knows me and values me within that. So that's one that for us, that we've used and done.
Yeah, you mentioned Enneagram. We both joked about it. Or 5 love languages. Any device, any article, anything that helps create a dialogue about what makes you feel valued is what's important. And again, like, I know for my wife, like, prioritizing exercise in her life, like, she loves that when I'm like, let's go for a run, which is my least favorite thing to do with another human being. I don't know how you breathe and talk and run at the same time. So it's not my fun thing to do, but like, just prioritizing that. So just, I don't know, every couple's so different, but just being able to have that conversation is value giving in itself. When a husband or wife says, hey, what would help you feel valued? And fighting the response of, shouldn't you already know? Like, I know you're somewhat kidding, but it's like, no, we can't know. And what we get value out of changes seasonally. I'm not as far along as you are, but I'm in a different season where, you know, that value can feel different, and what she feels value in does.
Yeah, and I would sort of echo that. You know, I'm also a believer in the love languages. I think that was something that we did before we got married. We went through one of the books, you know, about, I think it was the original one, the 5 love languages. And that's always been helpful for us. Sometimes we kind of deviate from it, and then we're like, you know, let's take this back up again, and it always makes things better. I think being explicit, though, is always better, especially for us. Like, men are not terribly complex. We need sort of to be told directly, and if you tell us directly, we're not going to be mad. Like, at least most of us won't. So that would be the thing for me, is whatever device it is, just be sort of explicit about it. Don't try to drop too many subtle hints, because he's probably not gonna know what to look for.
What are some of your favorite traditions with your kids?
What are some of your favorite traditions with your kids is the question. That's a fun one. Nice job. Yeah, that's a fun one. Favorite traditions, let's see, for me, I really enjoy daddy-daughter time, is what we call it. And so Monday mornings is my time with Finley. And she's doesn't do daycare, that's her day home with us while Mackenzie's at school. And so I take Finley in the morning. She is our picky eater. She will only eat 15 to 20 things, and so it's usually always Chick-fil-A, because she'll eat the chicken there. So we'll do Chick-fil-A, and then Thursday mornings is my time with Mackenzie. She's much more of my adventurous one, so we choose different restaurants basically every week. Variety, which I love. I enjoy those more. She might be, we'll see. That might be a 7. And so daddy-daughter time is really fun. It's such a fun tradition that we love. And then the family meetings one that I mentioned earlier was another tradition that we do, which has been really wonderful. It's a couple of ours. Or those are enough.
We have like there's different kinds of traditions. There's daily ones. So mine is like, I like to say goodnight to each kid and tell them all the ways that I saw that I was proud of them during the day, like things I noticed in them. One of our sayings in our home is celebrate what you want to replicate. So we're always celebrating things that we want to replicate in our children's lives. So we take time to do that. Then we have like our big milestones, like every 10th birthday, Susie takes one of the boys to New York City for a Broadway show, because we're New Yorkers and It just feels right. When they're 13, I'll take them to hopefully a New York Giants game, although my oldest, when he turned 13, he said, I want to go to a Duke basketball game. I had no idea that tickets to a Duke basketball game are more expensive than to a professional football game. So we saw Duke play Princeton because nobody wants to go to that game. So like when they're 13, we do something big like that. But then there's other just little traditions, like the night the Christmas tree goes up, we all sleep on the floor underneath the Christmas tree. The next solstice, whatever the one is in June, like we're all gonna sleep outside in the backyard. And all those, we just have built traditions into our home, often based out of two phrases that both have the word celebrate. But one, you celebrate what you want to replicate, which is just a good parenting technique and fun family thing. And my wife always says, we are in charge of our own celebrations. The world isn't going to create celebrations for us. So let's make those celebrations fun and exciting and memorable. And so that's what we do.
Yeah, for me, well, I guess my family, with two younger kids, we haven't necessarily established too many traditions, but I've started to realize that there are certain things that I find I like, and then I think there's things that Erica and I find that we like sort of together as a whole family with the kids. So one is that I try to make time to play with the kids, once a week for an extended time, where they can just sort of pick what they want to do, and it may be something that's really boring, or it may be something that's kind of fun. But regardless, it's fun for them, and I can play with them. That's one thing. Another thing is that they're starting to get into sports, and I find that as a particularly good way as a father to kind of tell my kids I'm proud of them for trying hard, for trying something new, for kind of going beyond. And so, Erica likes that they do sports, but it doesn't matter that much to her. But for me, it's I like seeing my kids try new things and succeed and sometimes fail. But regardless, they tried hard and they did something that was outside their comfort zone. So that's sort of a tradition. I started going to their practices and things like that for like tennis and baseball and whatever. And then we do have the things like Christmas, or at dinner we'll say, what was your favorite thing today? We'll go around the table and say that, or we have this little thing with like cards on it. They're on like a little binder ring, and there's little questions that they can ask. So my oldest son can now read, so he will like look at the card and he'll read it to the table, and we'll discuss. So those kinds of traditions, and then I think there's also just like the nighttime routine of like putting them to bed, snuggles, reading stories, all that stuff. I also just find that I'm glad that every night I'm basically there for their bedtime and to tell them I love them, and that I'm proud of them, and even if it was a bad day, we're gonna have a better day tomorrow. I love you, God loves you. Let's have a good night. So yeah, I think whatever they are, I think what you said is right on. Things that you want to do, repeat. Things that are good, repeat.
Mark, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, now as a grandpa, I tell bear stories. So, because we lived in Alaska, so I have a lot of true ones, and then I make up ones.
You're a grandpa, you can say whatever you want.
That's right,
That's
you
right.
get it. So, but
So fun.
yeah, just anyway, just whatever we can do with our kids. That's but I think kids really like routine, even cleaning up. Picking things up as a routine. And devotions with our kids. We had this little book where you did the devotion book, and then you found the ladybug afterwards. Little things like that. Kids remember those, and they're just real blessings. So.
Can you share any advice for moms whose husbands are not Christian or not acting as the spiritual head of the family?
So the question is, can you share any advice for moms whose husbands are not Christians or acting as the spiritual head of the family?
This was by far the toughest question, I think, in the list.
Yeah, I know.
And I think part of the reason it's tough is that I don't think, just in the nature of how the marital relationship works, I don't personally see how, if the husband is not kind of taking up his responsibility as a spiritual head of the household, however that's shared between the husband and the wife, if he's not taking it up, I don't personally know anything that a wife could do that would convince him. And I think maybe that's the lesson, is that you cannot change everything. You have to do what is right for you and for your kids. You know, and I think nothing is more important to me than my faith. So, you know, and that's true for Erica too. So, you know, you have to do what's important for your kids. But I think there's, at some point, like if you try to change him, you know, if he is not fulfilling that duty, if you keep trying to change him, I think it only can really breed resentment or whatever. And, you know, the only other thing I could think of would be try to find other families where the father does take up his responsibility. And, you know, I think there are some men who are not, you know, who are not Christian, or they don't go to church or whatever it is. I mean, my father-in-law, he never went to church with Erica. And so when she met me, it was important to her that I did go to church, and I did, you know, believe in God, and I did have a strong faith life. But I think that can, in some ways, other men could be a better influence, I think, on faith than necessarily the wife. It's sort of a strange thing, but I think if he's not fulfilling his duties there, I think actually other men would be a better pressure. That's sort of my take, but this was like really a hard question when I read it. So whoever wrote it, good job.
A couple thoughts. One, anytime in marriage people have differing thoughts on key components of life, like faith, it's hard. I mean, I think that's a reality. And so that can happen all sorts of ways. I mean, in this pandemic, we've done marriage counseling with, you know, their views of the pandemic have been so polarizing that it's hurting their marriage. So I would just say, like, anytime there's those things, find somebody to talk with about that, whether it's a professional counselor, a pastor, or somebody. Like, we love talking to people through those things. So those are hard dynamics. Second, I'll say the phrase, like, head of the household, duties as head of a household, is in and of itself an interesting phrase, because even probably at this table, we would all define that differently with Scripture. And so even that phrase looks interesting to me and feels interesting to me, because, you know, Susie and I both feel a real sense of leadership in our home together. And so just that phrase can mean different things to different denominational and Christian backgrounds. And so just know, like, if that phrase feels normal to you, great. If that phrase feels uncomfortable to you, great. There's dialogue to be had around that phrase. And then I would say, even in our home, Susie and I know that, like, we can't be everything to our kids' spiritual development. And so Susie and I have values of, like, church is a non-negotiable for our kids. And the good news is they love it. So they're here Sundays, they're here Thursday nights. We're always bringing them to church, and they always love being in church. The other thing we do is we always bring great Christian people into our home, young adults that are way cooler than I am, that the boys go, wow, like, that's what a godly college woman looks like. Maybe I'll marry one like that someday. Or, hey, that's what a godly young guy looks like. Maybe I'll be like that one day. And so we're always surrounding in our home people that we want our kids to go, wow, look, they follow Jesus, or they have great moral values set, and I want to be like that. And then even, I think, you know, like, again, I do think we'll never change our spouses. That is a number one in our marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling. You're not going to change your spouse. So I would just say, yeah, like, what friends are you having in the home? I love it when people say, hey, like, you know, I want you to become friends with, you know, they may say our wife, or I want you to become friends with my husband, or whatever, and my wife, not our wife, my wife and my husband. And then, like, Susie and I just love being a part of that home and getting to know those people and showing them an example of what faith could look like. Those are some thoughts that came to mind on that question.
You know, the Bible talks about just winning your husband over by, you know, living your Christian life before him. And probably, you know, the best book that talks about that is The Power of a Praying Wife. I've read both the books now, Power of a Praying Husband and Wife. And those concepts of praying for your spouse deeply, strongly, specifically, it really changes your heart. I also believe that a Christian wife, that if your husband's not Christian or not spiritual leader, that you still have boundaries and deserve to be respected, and you should not be going his direction, right? You should be staying in your lane as a Christian woman, and I would really encourage that. It's God's job to work on his heart, and it's your job to love him as best you can, and to pray hard for him, and to have other people pray hard, and to have other influences as well. But definitely a challenge, but talking about love and boundaries versus expectations and other things would probably be most helpful.
All right, one more. What was one thing as a parent or a husband you're really glad you did?
What is one thing as a parent or a husband you're really glad you did? Is the question.
Yeah, homeschooling. But no, I think, well, first of all, it's a bit unusual for men to homeschool, especially young kids. And, you know, I know through working and being in church and all that, there are men who are older, you know, the kids have moved out of the house and they regret not being around their kids as much, you know, when they were younger. And I can look at that and say, well, look, I spend, you know, an hour, a couple hours a day with my, you know, right now just with my one son, but in a couple of years it'll be both. You know, I won't have that regret when I'm older. I will have spent a lot of time with them. I'll have taught them a whole lot. Of course, they're their own people. They're going to develop their own, you know, personalities and beliefs, and I can just sort of present them what I think is best. But yeah, for me, that would definitely be the biggest thing that I'm glad I did. You know, and it is a bit unusual. There's like all the, I mean, I'll see like YouTube videos, and it's always like, you know, somebody's homeschooling, hi moms, and all this stuff. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I'm the one dad doing it. But yeah, that's the big thing for me is make, you know, I will never have that regret of not spending enough time with my kids. You know, not sharing enough with them, not being able to show them that I'm proud of them. Because sometimes we do kind of keep it in, but yeah, that would be the biggest thing that I'm proud of.
For me, we studied a book in our small group that talked about creating family values, and so my favorite thing that we've done is we actually had framed and put on the wall one overarching verse, and then 4 family values, which are hardworking, generosity, thankfulness, and kindness, and then a supporting verse on them. And we use those in our discussions each time at dinner. So we'll ask, you know, what's one thing you're thankful for? We don't ask all 4 every night or anything like that, but that's just been a really neat visual reminder to help build those character traits in, ask about it, talk about them as the kids get older. And so for me, that's one thing I'm really glad we did, was establish those. And those are agreed on. Lex and I talked about them. We had a long list of like 20 values, you know, and kind of thought through that, which ones, how many do we really want? And it's not that those 4 are the only 4 by any means, but I really like that those are hanging in the wall. I like that we talk about them, and a part of our family culture and family meetings with our kids.
Just 2 words, just, you know, I think in marriage, just keeping our friendships alive and just having interest together and keeping it fresh, but really still valuing the friendship, which often is what brought us together. And then with our kids, you know, we're parents, but we also want to have relationship and friendship with them. And especially as they get older, that transitions from parent to, you know, young adults, it really becomes friendship and relationship as you go forward. So those are just the 2 things that I think are essential for all of us as husbands and parents.
Yeah, we've joked about it. My favorite thing is our business meeting. Susie and I established that in part because she loves talking about finances. I hate talking about finances. And so we had to find, okay, Sunday nights we can talk about finances. But the agenda for our business meeting has changed through our seasons. So like, even with our kids, it's like, what's the one thing we're both gonna zero in on with Hudson? What's the one thing we're gonna zero in on with Wyatt? You know, what's the one thing with Tucker? And so like, because we build our family meeting agenda around things about parenting and marriage, it's made it better. Because I I don't want to check the credit card every night. Susie loves it. She's on mint.com, you know. Oh, what'd you order at Moe's today? You know, like she knows everything because she gets so excited about that. And I'm going, I don't. Like, and so it's just made it easy that we have one space where we talk about all those things together. And that's created a lot of oneness with Susie and I, and the best gift we can give our kids, more than anything, is oneness in marriage. And I realize we can't always control oneness in marriage. We have, like, spouses will make horrible choices that will break oneness. And so there is pain and loss of expectation and all those things that we'll deal with in our lives. But if we can, oneness in marriage is a great gift we can give our kids.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, I always feel just, again, there's so many dynamics that marriages go through, families go through. I know, Andrew, I don't know you much, but if any of us, like, we always make availability on our calendar to say, hey, we want to meet with you and talk with you about those things. So if there's any way we ever can, who cares if you go to the chapel or not or whatever, like, we want to be there for you. Sometimes it takes a third person in the room. I love being that third person in the room. I think it's really fun. Not everybody does, but like, that's exciting for me. So let us help. The New Yorker in me? I don't know. Maybe it's the younger brother in me that just had to mediate my sister's fights all the time. For a while, it was just stay away from their bathroom. Never go near it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good day, everyone.
I have